In the brutal, sun-scorched theater of North Africa, a legend was being forged. General Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox, was the undisputed master of mobile warfare, his Afrika Korps sweeping across the vast expanse of Libya and Egypt with astonishing speed. It was 1941, and the name Rommel struck fear into the hearts of Allied commanders. He was a tactical genius, a bold innovator who seemed to defy the very logic of desert combat. To his men, he was an inspiration. To the high command, he was a miracle worker. But to Rommel himself, this string of victories fostered a dangerous belief that his opponents, particularly the British and Commonwealth forces, were inherently inferior, slow, predictable, and lacking the aggressive spirit of the Wehrmacht. This conviction would become the most treacherous terrain he would ever face.
But even a fox can get a thorn in its paw. That thorn was Tobruk, a vital port town on the Libyan coast. Captured by the Allies in early 1941, it became an unyielding fortress, disrupting Rommel's supply lines and mocking his rapid advances. He called it an insignificant coastal town, a mere inconvenience. Yet, month after month, the primarily Australian defenders, grim and resolute, held firm against wave after wave of German and Italian assaults. Rommel, accustomed to swift, decisive victories, found his panzers bogged down, his supply lines stretched thin, and his reputation for invincibility challenged. This wasn't the fluid, open warfare he excelled at. This was a grinding siege, a test of endurance he believed the desert rats were incapable of winning. His impatience grew, fueling his disdain for an enemy that simply refused to break.
It was during this frustrating siege of Tobruk that Rommel's contempt for his adversaries crystallized into a famous derogatory nickname, the desert rats, he called them. A term meant to convey their perceived insignificance, their stubbornness, and their dirty, tenacious refusal to surrender. He saw them as vermin, scurrying in their holes, unworthy of his panzer's might. Yet instead of demoralizing the Allied forces, this insult was embraced with defiant pride. The desert rats became a badge of honor, a symbol of their resilience and cunning in the face of a superior foe. Rommel failed to grasp that for an underdog, a dismissive insult can be the greatest motivator. He mistook their tenacity for desperation, their ingenuity for mere stubbornness. This fundamental misjudgment would prove to be a recurring theme in the unforgiving sands of North Africa. In November 1941, the Allies launched Operation Crusader, a massive offensive designed to relieve Tobruk and destroy the Afrika Korps. Rommel was initially caught off guard, surprised by the sheer scale and audacity of the attack. For a moment, even the Desert Fox seemed to hesitate. But his inherent aggression and deep-seated belief in his own tactical genius quickly took over. Instead of fighting a defensive battle, he opted for a daring, almost reckless gamble, a deep flanking maneuver, aiming to cut off the Allied rear and relieve his own forces. His staff officers voiced serious concerns, fearing overextension and logistical nightmares. Yet Rommel dismissed their caution as weakness, convinced that his panzer speed and his own brilliance would once again outwit the slow British. He saw the vast Allied columns as an opportunity for encirclement, a testament to their predictable tactics rather than a formidable challenge. Rommel's gamble initially paid off with terrifying effectiveness. His panzers, led by his personal drive, sliced through the vast yet thinly protected Allied supply lines, causing widespread panic and confusion. British quartermasters, caught completely by surprise, watched helplessly as their convoys of vital fuel and ammunition exploded in dusty plumes. Rommel, viewing the unfolding chaos through his binoculars, felt his confidence surge. This was the warfare he loved. Fast, decisive, overwhelming. He believed he had once again exposed the desert rats' inherent disorganization and lack of battlefield awareness. The disruption was immense, and for a fleeting moment, it seemed his audacious plan would succeed in breaking the entire Allied offensive. He saw the retreating trucks and disoriented soldiers not as a fleeting victory, but as definitive proof of his unchallengeable strategic mind, a testament to his belief that Allied forces would always crumble under pressure. But Rommel's deep thrust into the Allied rear had a critical flaw. It did not break the spirit of the Tobruk garrison. Despite hearing news of the German counterattack and the disruption of their own supply lines, the desert rats within Tobruk refused to panic. Their lines held firm. They continued to repel every German assault, their resolve hardened by months of siege. Rommel, receiving intelligence that Tobruk remained defiant, became increasingly baffled. He could not comprehend an enemy that continued to fight with tenacity even when their rear was in chaos. His understanding of warfare was based on demoralization through overwhelming force, and these rats simply refused to be demoralized. He saw their stubbornness as an irrational defiance rather than a calculated, unbreakable will, a trait he continually dismissed at his own peril. While Rommel was preoccupied with his deep thrust, underestimating the Allied ability to adapt, the desert rats were already delivering their counterpunch. The British 7th Armored Division, supported by resolute infantry, launched a fierce, coordinated attack against Rommel's exposed flank. The desert, momentarily cleared by his advance, now filled with the roar of Allied engines and the crackle of small arms fire. Rommel, receiving frantic reports from his commanders, began to realize the precariousness of his position. His bold gamble, designed to decapitate the enemy, had instead dangerously overextended his own forces. The desert rats were not just scurrying away, they were biting back, hard and unexpectedly. He had assumed they would crumble, yet they were demonstrating a resilience that defied his every expectation and challenged the very foundation of his tactical genius. Rommel's rapid advances and bold flanking maneuvers came at a steep price, a logistical nightmare. His supply lines, already stretched thin across hundreds of miles of unforgiving desert, became prime targets for Allied air attacks. Convoys of vital fuel, ammunition, and water were decimated by relentless strafing runs. In field hospitals, doctors wrestled with dwindling supplies, unable to cope with the mounting casualties. Rommel, a master of strategy, found himself trapped by the brutal reality of desert warfare. He had consistently underestimated the Allied air superiority and their determination to cut off his lifelines. His desert rats were not just on the ground, they were in the air, picking apart his army piece by piece. His maps showed impressive advances, but the reality on the ground was a constant, desperate battle against starvation and lack of vital resources, slowly strangling his once invincible Afrika Korps. The tide had turned. Under relentless Allied pressure and strangled by his own logistical overextension, Rommel was forced to order a full retreat. His once proud panzers, which had swept across North Africa with such impunity, were now falling back in disarray, leaving behind abandoned vehicles and a trail of defeat. Rommel, observing the withdrawal from his staff car, felt the bitter taste of a denied victory. He had been outmaneuvered, not by overwhelming force, but by the stubborn resilience and tactical flexibility of an enemy he had repeatedly dismissed. The desert rats, far from being insignificant vermin, had proven to be tenacious, adaptable, and utterly unbreakable. This retreat, a humiliating blow to his reputation, was a direct consequence of his arrogance, a testament to his inability to truly respect his opponent's capabilities. The cheers echoed across the desert as the Allied forces finally relieved Tobruk. Months of brutal siege, of relentless attacks and desperate defense had come to an end. The desert rats had held their ground, proving their resilience against overwhelming odds. News of Tobruk's relief reached Rommel in his retreating headquarters, a bitter pill to swallow. The insignificant coastal town, the thorn in his paw, had not only defied him, but had become a symbol of his strategic misjudgment. He crumpled the dispatch, the weight of his defeat pressing down on him. This wasn't just a lost battle, it was a profound blow to his image, a stark reminder that even the most brilliant general could be undone by underestimating the sheer will of his enemy. The rats had survived his traps, and in doing so had claimed a moral victory that reverberated far beyond the sands of Libya. The echoes of Rommel's dismissive insult now resonated with ironic force. News of his retreat in the relief of Tobruk spread quickly, not just among the Allied ranks, but back to Berlin, where his reputation for invincibility was now questioned. British newspapers carried cartoons of a triumphant desert rat chasing a bewildered fox across the dunes, much to the delight of the Allied troops. Rommel, back in a more secure but still dusty field headquarters, faced a barrage of uncomfortable questions from the high command. He had dismissed his enemies as mere vermin, yet these rats had exposed the fatal flaw in his genius, his inability to adapt to an enemy who refused to follow his scripts. The desert, once his stage for grand tactical displays, now felt like a cage, closing in on him as the cost of his pride became painfully clear. The North African campaign would rage on for another year, with victories and defeats for both sides. Rommel, ever the brilliant tactician, would achieve more stunning successes, but the shadow of his arrogance, first cast by the desert rats of Tobruk, would linger. He would learn, slowly and painfully, that even the most formidable adversary could be broken not by superior force alone, but by a relentless spirit and an unwavering will to fight. Commander Miller and countless others like him understood that the desert didn't care for glory or grand titles, it cared only for tenacity. Rommel, gazing out at the vast, indifferent desert, would carry the indelible mark of Tobruk, a lesson in humility delivered by the very rats he so disdainfully dismissed, proving that true courage often thrives where pride expects only surrender.